Introducing Tim, my friend from North Macedonia. Welcome in, Tim. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
The goal of today is to learn a little bit about North Macedonian culture and how it compares to United States culture. Um, Tim and I actually went to college together. We were in residence life together. Had a lot of good times. We were doppelgangers with each other. A lot of people probably, if I got my hair, I should have got a haircut before this. People might have still confused us. All the time, I would be called Tim. Tim would be called AJ across campus. Um,
Yeah.
Good problem to have, in my opinion. But um, so that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. We have 15 questions that were pre-written, and then we have if the audience ends up having any questions near the end, we'll jump into those as well. So just to get started, Tim, could you please give us a little bit about your background, including the country where you grew up and your career path?
Yeah, of course. And yeah, just introduction. My name is Timote, and I just go by Tim. I was born here in Macedonia, so I was born in Skopje, which is the capital city here. And both my parents work in ministry. And when I was really small, like 2 years old, probably, we moved to a small town called Negotino, which is in central Macedonia, and they moved there for ministry. The town's population is about 15 to 20,000 people, and in diameter is probably around 2 miles. It's a really small town, very walkable. You can get on foot almost anywhere, and that's where I grew up and spent most of my time up until I turned 18, which is when I moved to the U.S. for college. Um, so growing up, I spent a lot of time outdoors playing with neighborhood kids. I was also super into drawing. I would bring sketchbooks everywhere with me, and I had a period of time where I'd ask pretty much almost anyone in front of me for longer than 20 minutes to draw them. So relatives, people like on trains or whatnot, I would just be like, "Oh, I just draw people. Would you like me to draw you?" And they weren't like great, but they were okay. I was kind of learning. That was one of the things that I was into. And then computers and the internet became a thing as I was growing up. And I remember playing old computer games. Like there's a Toy Story 2 that I vividly remember, a Buzz Lightyear game that my dad installed on the PC. So then I kind of merged some of that art stuff, design stuff, and tech, which led me to what I do right now, which is software development and design. So that's what I still work on to this day. And but part of that is if I backtrack a little bit, after middle school here in Macedonia, we have an option to do different high school paths. So this could be your regular one, which is just a GED, so you get a general education diploma. That's kind of similar to what I think the experience of most people in the US would be like. And then you also have a lot of different other paths. Like if you're into arts, you can just do an art program for high school. Or if you want to do engineering, you can right off the bat do engineering in high school or medicine. That's also a path. Really, almost anything you can think of, there's a more narrow path that you can focus on. And what that looks like is I did a STEM path, so it was more focused on engineering, which meant I had a little bit more math in high school and a little bit less biology maybe. So I had also specific like engineering and automation courses, which then, of course, the idea is that they would either help you get a job right out of college, right out of high school, or prepare you for, better for college career and whatever you're trying to do. And then because the software development was kind of on the rise when I was growing up and I was interested in tech, I decided to pursue that high school path and then study computer science at the University of Findlay in Ohio. So that's kind of my background as far as, where I grew up, how I grew up, etc.
So, was it specifically wanting to go to college in the United States that brought you over, or was there more to it than that, or did your whole family move?
Yeah, so I'd always been interested in studying in the U.S. Growing up, you just watch a lot of TV or movies. Most of it, I mean, you guys, it's kind of weird because other people's cultures they watch the United States media. it's like it's your own. So I don't think you recognize that as much.
Right.
You know what I mean? So then, as opposed to, like, let's say all of your media was in Chinese, you would recognize that that's outside of the US, right? That was the norm. But the mainstream media and most of anything you consume, even games or books, they're going to be in English. And so then you learn a little bit more about the culture. And obviously, I feel like they're going to show a lot of fun things, especially when you're younger. You pay attention to those things, so you'll see like high schoolers hanging out in, like, I don't know, like a Starbucks, riding convertibles to go to the parties, stuff like that. And coming from a culture where, like, you don't even get a driver's license when up until you're 18. There's some exemptions where, like, if you have like a B plus average, I think you can get driver's license when you're 16. But otherwise, you have to wait till you're 18 to get a driver's license.
Hmm.
Now, I had pretty good grades, so I was able to get it slightly earlier, kind of, or at least start the process slightly earlier. But even so, people just don't drive here as much when they're younger. That becomes a thing later on, because also families usually have like one car. That's kind of the norm, as opposed to having, a car per person that drives, or at least two per family. And so then you don't really drive as much. You don't see that moment of a high schooler in a convertible pulling up to a party or something. And I mean, a lot of that, I know that's not the experience of every high schooler in the US, but that's just part of what I was presented with when I was learning about it. So, which created an interest for me to want to study in the US in the first place. Now, I don't know how serious I was about that. I mean, I was kind of focused on my high school education at the time, when, uh, I wasn't too focused, I guess, on studying in the US. But midway through high school, I met someone that I ended up dating for a period of time, and they ended up attending UF, which is the main reason that I explored specifically the University of Finley. And then coincidentally, there was a scholarship program through an organization called Education USA for the University of Finley, and this was available to Macedonians. And the thing that I don't know, sometimes I'm like, higher power or not, but it's that scholarship opportunity showed up just for that year that I applied, and then it disappeared. Like, that's it, just for the University of Finley, which is specifically where I wanted to go, and I only applied to the University of Finley. I thought about applying to other colleges, but I'm like, it's either that's where I'm going, or I guess I'll figure out something else. I don't know. But so, and then I heard there were over 130 applicants for it, and there were only four selected. I was one of the people that was
Wow.
selected for that program, and it was a full tuition scholarship. So one of the things is that U.S. tuition is a lot more expensive than Macedonian college tuition. So my parents wouldn't have saved up for me to study in the United States. So without a scholarship, that supports most of, at least, of tuition, you would not be able to, as a regular Macedonian, go and study in the United States. So that was definitely an opportunity, and it seemed to me like, all the stars aligned for me to make the move, which is why I ended up going to the US. And even so, a big part of that is my parents' support. I mean, I was just kind of, you're just young, and you're still in high school, and you're trying to figure out life, and I'm asking them to move across the world. And I don't remember a lot of resistance in that. It was more of like, hey, like, kind of, are you sure that this is what you want to do? And they were very supportive, but it wasn't met with like any resistance in terms of like, we don't think you should be doing this. you
Wow.
know so they were behind me all the way. That's something I'm really grateful for, even though I kind of took it for granted at the time. Like, now looking back, I'm like, they really had to think about this, because it's me moving across the world, and there's also like financial things that they still have to be attached to for supporting a kid across the world. And again, yeah, they really supported me throughout that whole thing. So
That's fantastic. Awesome.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest culture shock you faced when you moved over, and how did you adapt to that?
Yeah, so I don't know that I had that much culture shock. So part of it is, again, my parents were in ministry, so we would get like missionary teams visit Macedonia. Um, and a lot of times those missionary teams would be college groups, that they would be visiting Macedonia for a period in the summer. And growing up, middle school, high school, I spent a lot of my summers with these teams because, I just spend time around my family. And therefore, because my dad spent, his time around with these missionary groups. I was also with them, and I would translate for them a lot of times, or I would guide them through different parts of Macedonia. A lot of times it would be hometown or surrounding the hometown, or then asking locals if I didn't know where things were when we were in other cities, because we would go in a lot of other cities. And I think from them, I learned a lot about US culture uh, and how people behave, I guess, in the US, even though it wasn't that drastically different from what I would expect, because I also had movies and TV shows that I grew up with. So then I feel like one of the benefits of that is that you were kind of more accustomed to the culture, as opposed to you as from the United States. You haven't seen a Macedonian movie, most likely, because we don't have that many.
Almost certainly not.
You haven't seen a lot of Macedonian media. So then when you come here, everything is brand new, you know? And
Right.
I think that's when people experience a little bit more of a culture shock. I think for me, it wasn't necessarily just like culture, even though I think one of the things is just like the personal space and individualism is a little bit more emphasized in the US. So that was a cultural thing, or kind of a more work focused and planning focused, productivity focused culture. That was a little bit more of a thing where it wasn't a shock. I guess maybe that's the word that doesn't resonate with me, because it wasn't like a big shock, but it
Hmm.
was definitely something I wasn't used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and then from like a structural or just environment perspective, so maybe not culture necessarily, but everything is like large in the US. Like like cars here, for example. You're gonna go in Macedonia, you're gonna see a lot of older cars, a lot of smaller cars. There are gonna be sedans and you know SUVs. You'll see here and there. You'll see SUVs. It's not like we don't have them. But then pickup trucks, you'll virtually not see a pickup truck here. And I feel like in the US, you're gonna see a lot of SUVs and a lot of pickup trucks. If I'm not wrong, I think the Ford F-150 is the most sold vehicle in the United States.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and and here you rarely see a pickup truck on the road. And when you do, it's like, oh, so it's like a pickup truck. It just kind of, Uh, so then again, another thing is just the roads. You have so many like 8-lane highways everywhere. Or it's just, yeah, everything is large, including stores like Walmart's or Costco's, any of that stuff. All of our stores here are smaller scale. You will typically not find a store that sells all the regular groceries and then clothes as well. But then you go to a Target and a quarter of the store is just clothing dedicated, and it's still huge. And then there's a quarter that's just a regular grocery store that has your typical day-to-day stuff. And
Yep.
then another quarter is like all of the skincare and I feel like we have it on a smaller scale here, but it's not nothing like the US.
Yeah.
uh I've seen the jokes. I don't know if you've seen a lot of those TikToks where you see like an American and they'll be in front of the Eiffel Tower and they'll say like, "This is great, but picture 4-lane highway."
Yeah.
Walmart on
Yes.
one side, Costco on the other, and I feel like that's a lot of times like and when you land in the US, you notice that.
Yeah.
Uh,
That is us, unfortunately.
yeah. And then with that, I think it comes that the US is built around cars.
Yes.
So, all of this stuff that we mentioned is because it supports that driving infrastructure. A lot of, if you go to almost anywhere in Europe, you'll see that it's built a little bit more around walking and public transportation. So that's one thing that the US doesn't have as much. And here I live in the capital city, and I have so much available to me just within a very small walking distance. I'm talking within like 500 feet. I have probably like four bakeries,
Wow.
that I can walk to. And then 800 feet, I have five grocery stores that I can go to for the rest of my stuff. And butcher shops, I have three butcher shops. And a lot of times they are literally in the apartment building. The first floor of the apartment building is some sort of store. It's not residence, it's just the walking area. So as soon as you leave, you exit the apartment building, that's a store right there. You have the first floor is just all of these different uh, stores, or any kind of shops, or specialty services that people offer. So that's even pharmacies. There's so many pharmacies. Like, I have a pharmacy just as soon as I leave my apartment. There's a pharmacy right across, in the building next door. So I don't really have to get in a car for most things. Um, and then within, I don't know, probably 900 feet, I have a mall.
Wow.
And again, I don't have a car here right now, but I don't feel like I need one too.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Where we're in the US, you I feel like you need a car a lot more.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I feel like you need a car a lot more.
We'll have walkable cities in the US as soon as we start building apartments over the Walmarts. We'll be good.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
walk right down to the
I feel
Walmart.
like that should be a bigger thing. Now, the problem with that is Walmart has high ceilings, so you can't you can't do the exact same thing. But you gotta start building like small shops and more. Yeah, I feel like I'd love to see that in the U.S. a little
Yeah.
more.
Me
And I
too.
know people talk about these like 15-minute towns, or
Yes.
15-minute cities, which is the idea is you're able to get from one area to the other, or one end of town to the other, in 15 minutes walking, which is kind of similar to the town that I grew up in.
Yeah.
I lived in kind of the center of that town, and you also have a lot more of these areas that are in the US known as walking districts, which is just an area meant for just walking. There are no cars there. Cars can't go in that area. And you have just a bunch of shops and cafes. And that's really it. And like fountains, shops, cafes, and a lot of times you'll see people out, a lot of benches, trees around. So you'll see retired people. That's like, the joke is retired people spend their lives on these benches. They'll just be outside when the weather's warm, and they'll just be talking there. I mean, also younger people, anyone is really just outside
Yeah.
when they can in these walking districts.
Here in the US, they have to hang out in malls. All the retirees, they just and like the
Right.
malls are really dying here too. So like it's basically like a retirement home, but with no monitoring.
Right.
Um, so yeah, no, it's tough here in the U.S. at the moment.
It's I think the closest thing you guys have in the US is the outdoor malls,
Yes, yep,
where you just have a bunch of shops in an area, but just take away all the vehicles driving through that area.
right,
Just instead of roads in between all of those shops, just have them all just be, just for walking. And then, there could still be a parking lot or something where people could park outside. But as soon as
yeah.
you enter that area, it's all just, and for walking.
That creates some safety too, which is
Right.
nice. Let's move on to what's your favorite part of Macedonia? And maybe it's the walkability of the cities, but what would you say is your
Yeah,
favorite?
walkability is definitely a thing that I enjoy about Macedonia. Other things, let's see. What do I enjoy about Macedonia? Favorite part. Um, I think a sense of community. I think that's a big thing. And as we go through some of these other questions, I think I'll touch a little bit more on that sense of community. But that is a difference where it's not like a on and off switch. it's not like US doesn't have a sense of community.
Sure.
Macedonia has a sense of community. It's just more of like a dial, I'd explain it. And I feel like we just have that a little bit higher. And what that looks like is, especially because, towns are smaller, usually more walkable, more accessible. People kind of know each other. So in terms of my town, there's like not a lot of crime in it because I feel like even if something happens the next day, everyone knows who did it and when, it's, and you don't even have to know them or ask those questions. You'll just be walking into a cafe because that's just really common. People go and hang out in cafes here almost every day. That's just part of your regular routine because everything's so accessible. You leave work, especially if you're in a smaller town, in a smaller town, you'll leave work and on your lunch break, you'll be at a cafe or you leave work at the end of the day and you'll just meet up at a cafe with all of your friends and they'll say, "Did you hear about this yesterday? They literally tried to rob this place. They showed up. This guy and this guy tried to rob this place." They'll literally know them by name and everything. And yeah, and that's just a story that you hear every once in a while. A lot of
Yeah.
times, it's not even a robbing a place. It will be just like there's a fight that happened outside a bar or something. That's really the extent of crime that we have in the smaller towns. And with it, back to my favorite part, I think is the sense of community, which is like if you know two people, they all know each other, So like I know A and B, they all are going to know, both of them are going to know C. And therefore, because you're already friends with A and B, you're going to be a lot more trusting and a lot more open to having a relationship with C. And
Hmm.
you're gonna establish like that a level of bondness a little bit earlier in the process. It's almost like a whole college experience built in. You know how on
Yeah.
campus everything's kind of together, everything's walkable, especially at a campus like where we both attend at like University of Findlay. Um, Everything's kind of close together. So then if you know two people and they're hanging out with someone else, you immediately trust that other person
Right.
because you're friends with the other two people.
Yep.
And I think that's how things are here, but more of on a town level. You don't have to be in a college community to experience that.
Right. That's really
But I would
nice.
say that's my favorite thing, or one of my favorite things that, I get to enjoy here where I'm in Macedonia.
That's
That
great.
again, you can experience that in the US, but I think there's just so much distance a lot of times. Like I have to get in a car to meet with you and have coffee with you. And I
Yeah.
have to drive at least 20 minutes to get, and you have to drive 20 minutes. And that little bit of, resistance is, I think, a lot of times enough for me to not meet with you as frequently.
Yeah.
We'll still meet and grab a coffee, but you know, maybe you're going to have to plan a little bit more,
Yeah.
while in Macedonia, it's more of like, hey, like you'll get a call and are you free in 10 minutes? And they'll expect you to be there in 10 minutes because you can be. And, you're just getting off work. It's
Right.
like, what am I going to do with my day? I'm literally going to hang out with people. So,
That's awesome. I really like that. Could you please tell me about a time you had a miscommunication or a misunderstanding with an American?
yeah. So, yeah, I guess tying into some of those bonds or relationships that you develop with people, I think you get a lot more comfortable with people here a lot more quickly. So then, like again, as I mentioned, like you're gonna know John and James, and they're both friends with Mark. So
Hmm.
then you're going to be a lot more comfortable with Mark right off the bat because you know John and James and they both know Mark, even if you just met him. And
Hmm.
then because of that, Mark also trusts you because he's friends with John and James. He also trusts you, and you have that relationship where even if you just met, you're comfortable enough to just be, sharing in jokes. And a lot of times, like you make like jokes on the other person's account,
Just
not sure.
ribbing them,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and that's like similar to like if you have siblings and you meet a person that doesn't have siblings, I think they're going to be a lot more sensitive to jokes that are personal jokes
Yeah.
as opposed to you being sensitive because you have siblings, because you've experienced that, a sibling say something to you, and it doesn't really mean much.
Hmm.
It's just kind of a joke. I don't think people like jokes in their name in terms of when they're like negative. But a lot of times it's just, yeah, if you're just lighthearted, you don't mind that. And I feel like I might have, especially when I first got there, I think I kind of overestimated my maybe level of friendship with people. And I would say like a joke. And I don't remember specific instances, but it would be like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember specific instances, but like an example that I came up with is, I don't know, you could say, let's say someone's paying for a tab and it's a small tab, and you could say, like, look at Mr. Moneybags over here, right? And you could say that, but if you know that person, it's fine, right? Like they don't care. But if you just met them, they might be like, is this like a dig at me? You know what I mean? And it also depends on how sensitive they are. But I think it's one of those things where it can lead to misunderstandings, you
Yeah.
know, because of you immediately assume that they are comfortable enough with a certain level of friendship where, you know, the expectation is that you build that friendship first. But I think it just comes from the community and how much how much of a shared network you already have.
Yeah. I think, to piggyback off of that, America is such an individualistic culture that
Right.
some people do take. They're like, "Oh, I just met you, and you're saying something about me. Why are you insulting me?" Where it's
Sure.
like, it's not everyone, right? Of course.
Yeah.
But it's like you said, the single children might be more likely because they're not used to taking those jokes, being ribbed like that. Um, I've definitely overestimated my level before, or even just put my foot in my mouth before. So, that's it's good to know I'm in good company.
Yeah, but you live and you learn.
Absolutely. Were there any noticeable clothing differences between Macedonia and the U.S.?
I think so. I think so. One of the things is I think in the US there's a lot more casual wear for like if you're just going out with friends to the mall. A lot of times it's just going to be, you're wearing comfortable kind of sweatpants. They don't look bad necessarily. It's just more of
Sure.
like you're wearing casual like athleisure wear. I feel like that's a little bit more common in the US where people here they tend to kind of dress up a little bit even if they're just going out for coffee, you know they're just going out for a small coffee. It's very again, you do it on a daily basis, but they'll dress up. They'll dress up because they're going in town, even though town is not big or it's not like a big thing. But it's also one of those things because you just never know who you're going to run into. You never know because everyone is in this kind of central hub. Everyone knows everyone, and then if you're, I don't know, let's say you're not wearing anything appropriate or whatever, you're just like a little bit more self-conscious over that because you just don't know what things are gonna. Well, it's yeah, you're just a little bit more self-conscious, I guess, over that because you don't feel like you fit into this larger community where everyone's dressed up, even if it's just a simple coffee or something.
Yeah. We
Yeah, and
we're the
then
society of pajama pants at Walmart. So,
yeah, yeah, that's definitely a thing because in the US, it's so large that you can get lost in the crowd,
mhm,
which creates that bigger sense of comfort,
makes
and
sense.
again, there's pros and cons to both of these situations. But yeah, when you're in the US, if you're just in pajamas or sweatpants or whatever, it doesn't matter because most of the people you interact with that day, you will never see another day in your life, you know?
Yes.
And that creates a sense of comfort because, you're not going to do anything super weird or unusual, I guess, but it's just more of that, oh, well, even if they judge me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then you go as opposed to like a college town and you're just wearing pajamas and you're going to a meeting with like all of your friends, then you're just like, okay, like I literally know everyone here and I'm going to see all of these people again tomorrow, you know?
Yeah.
and
We've got a
maybe
reputation.
just like I don't have to be wearing a suit and a tie, but like, yeah, just kind of dress up a little bit more for more casual events.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's I think a bit of a difference that I'd say when it comes to clothing.
gotcha. Um, did Americans have any specific beliefs that surprise you compared to Macedonia? Like in general, of course, like maybe not one like crazy guy in a corner, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think we touched on this, and it's that individualism. I think that's the, of course, again, back to the, it's not like black and white. It's not
right.
an on-off switch. It's just a little bit more of a dial where everyone is, of course, going to feel like they're the protagonist of their own story. And, you experience this life from your viewpoint. And it's sometimes hard to see it from other people's viewpoints. But different cultures are gonna have a different dial of how much you're gonna be more individual oriented or community oriented. And I think Macedonia sits kind of maybe in the middle, a little bit more community oriented, where the US sits on the end of individualism.
Yeah,
Like, of course, you're part of a community, and I think maybe in the US it tends to sit around the family extent where you're a part of that family, but then it doesn't go a lot further than that. And
yeah,
then in Macedonia, you are part of a family, so that is a part of a community that you're in. But then there's also that sense of a deeper community where you're part of a town, or uh, you see how things might impact a deeper community because you're a little bit more in touch with them on a daily basis. And again, even that in Macedonia, in smaller towns, you'll notice that a lot more than in bigger towns. How people, act, and how individualistically oriented they might be. But I grew up in a smaller town, and that's one big part that I noticed about a community, how people behave and relate towards each other. And because of that, like, there's pros and cons to that. The pro is you care about your community, and then your community cares about you, or that's the idea. And then again, the con is that you have to dress up. You have to think about the mentality of like, what will other people say? Like in the US, because your community might be a little bit smaller, then you only have to show up and think about what those people will say. You know, here, that what will other people think is a common mentality that stops some people from, being more rushing towards their goals or posting on social media or doing stuff like that, because they're like, hey, it's not just about my family and these few friends that I have. It's about like, what will my town be saying? You know,
yeah,
like what is going to be the talk with, like, in this larger community that I'm in. And there's a level of fear there that you could be judged or whatnot. So that's kind of the con of sometimes being a part of a community, which
sure.
which could also support some of your decisions. So if they support your decisions, then you feel a lot more empowered. But then the fear is that they would not support your decisions, or they would laugh at you. So then you feel a lot more closed in, and you don't want to take risks in that regard. Um, so yeah, I think that's the belief of you're the hero of your own story. I think it is a little bit more resonant in the US than I've seen in here in Macedonia. And that's kind of a belief that I would say is different. Uh, but yeah, and I mean, there are other cultures where, I don't know if you've heard of like Ubuntu, which is
Mm,
a belief they have in some of like the African tribes and in those communities where they literally, I think it translates to like, I am because you are. And it's a very communal oriented way of living. It just kind of like, in the US, for example, you have that individualistic culture. So then, like, let's say you're at a workspace and you see your peers progressing, right? You see your
hmm.
peers progressing, and there's a fear there that you're going to be left behind. That, well, maybe I shouldn't help this guy too much, and, shouldn't like, yeah, shouldn't help this guy too much, or give him the extra push there,
I
because
don't
then
want
I'm
them
going
to be
to be
better
left
than
behind,
me.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Well, in these communities, because of that, like, Ubuntu thinking, you have like, I am because you are. So then, if you're better, I'm better. You know, And then that's also a shared mindset, which then you don't feel left behind. It's like
Yeah.
if I help you, I'm also helping myself.
Yeah.
So I think if that dial is like, I feel like the US is a little bit more individualistic, and then you have these communities where, you know they share everything and they believe in, um, I am because you are. I think Macedonia maybe sits in the middle, and again, pros and cons of everything here.
Of
like
course.
um, but yeah, that's, I think, a belief that I'd say I've noticed.
Awesome. Would you say that Macedonia is fairly hierarchical, or do people see each other closer to equal despite their status level?
I think for the most part, I would say it's equal-ish. I think there's a mix of both. There's a mix of both. So hierarchy, from one sense, is more of a like an age thing, for example. And you see someone older than you, and then usually they're going to be maybe at a higher career level, etc. But I think there's a more shared level of respect because they're older than you, regardless of, maybe their financial success. It's just more of like a respect because they're older than you. And that's the hierarchy there. That doesn't mean that you have to do whatever they say,
Sure.
but it just means that, hey, because they're older, there's a certain level of hierarchy where, you should respect them, help them, or maybe listen to them when they tell you to do things. Um, but then amongst peers, people of a similar age, status is a thing, but I think it's more of just like who's flashier. It's not necessarily a hierarchical in terms of respect or, um, importance, if that makes sense. You
Gotcha.
know, which is that plays a big role. It's just more of like, how much do I respect you, regardless of how much money you have
Hmm.
or what your career is. Like, who are you as a person? I think that plays a bigger value. So then, people, hang out with others regardless of their career, professional path, etc. Like a lot of times, again, because everything's walkable, you have those walking districts. That's where people hang out.
Hmm.
Like you'll be drinking coffee with someone or whatever, and a person will pull up that some of your friends know. You don't know them. They'll just sit down, and you'll just get to know them throughout the rest of your coffee chat. And then the next week, you're drinking coffee again with them, and this person comes up again. You have a second conversation with them. So it's very much built into where that principle doesn't really care much about social status or
Yep.
all of that stuff. Uh, but yeah, people are very kind of honest, direct with each other. You might get a little bit more personal questions in Macedonia than you would in the U.S. So they're just the barrier of kind of a bubble, personal bubble. I think is a little bit more broken, I guess, in Macedonia than it might be in the U.S.
Yeah, it's it's coconut versus peach. So like in the US, I think in the US it's like, oh, it's a pretty hard exterior, but once you're in, you're in. And then in maybe more Macedonia, it's like, oh, we're pretty comfortable on the outside, but once we get really inside, it's like that's my inner circle.
Yeah,
We're
I
only
think so.
keeping that.
I
Yeah,
would say that's probably true. Yeah,
I think
that's a good analogy.
I think Germany is like extremely on the coconut scale. So,
It's, yeah,
um,
yeah, I believe it.
I think you'll definitely have an answer for this next one. Did you have any experiences in Macedonia where a group put a member first, or conversely, where an individual prioritized themselves over society?
Um, I mean, I think there's examples of both. Um, I can't think of too many specific examples, but it's
Hmm.
just kind of more of a mentality across the country. Like, I think, for example, on a smaller scale, on a family scale, I feel like when my family supported me to go to the US, that was them, at that period of time, putting me first. They were saying, like, we as a family are behind you, uh, when you're making this decision. We're putting you first here. We're supporting you 100% towards what you're doing. So that's an example where, if you were thinking a little bit more individualized, you would be like, well, should I be like spending all this money? Is he making the best decision? Maybe also like he's going to be a lot further away. And let's try to convince him to stay in Macedonia. Maybe this is not smart. What if he fails there? But it's more of like a group putting an individual first. And I think that happens a lot of times across the country where people help each other. In some level, I'm not saying that Macedonia is special. I think on some level, humans put people first sometimes, as in groups collectively will put individual first, because I also think that's a human trait. And, you know, there's obviously going to be bad people, but a lot of times humans show up when it matters. And you just notice that. And even like let's say a small example is when I was younger, we have here for like April for Fools, like for April 1st, we have like a Halloween thing. Like everyone dresses up. So we actually don't celebrate Halloween in Macedonia unless it's just parties and like more contemporary Macedonians, or I don't know, just more modern, where I think a lot of cultures are moving towards the US in some sense. So you're going to see Halloween parties, but it's not a part of the culture where we have trick or treating, any of that. But like on April 1st, it's the April Fool's Day, so you dress up as Halloween. Like it's the exact same thing, no trick or treating though. There's some other things, but not. And we from our school, this was when I was in middle school, I was given these uh, dress wares that traditional Macedonian dancers wore, and they were very expensive, and they were like loaned to us for us to wear as a group.
Wow.
And they were very expensive because they're old. They were traditional wares, and we as middle schoolers were supposed to wear like the whole class is kind of wearing these traditional dresses, traditional dancing uniforms, wears, I guess, clothing. And I lost some of them. I lot like I was
Oh no.
walking back from school, and this is like maybe I don't know, let's say 8 to 10 pieces, articles of clothing that you put on. So there's like a vest, there's pants, there's like a little thing that it's not a belt, but it's just kind of a wear that you wrap around your waist. A lot of different components that went into it, and I think I lost like three of them. So I had put them in my book bag, and as I was walking back from school, a roundabout way to just kind of because I was walking a friend back home and then walking back to my house, I lost like three or four of those pieces.
Oh, no.
So then I told my parents, and I was specifically told that these were like expensive things and you're supposed to take care of them. You know, lose them was not like out of the question, basically. And so then told my parents, and they actually reached out to like some friends, all of that. So it was a lot of different people that were friends of my family, and some of them, through church, some of them like direct friends. They went out looking for these things just as part of their day, you
Wow.
know, as in they would be on their daily walk on or whatever, and it was just kind of like sending signals in this community tree. And yeah, within a day, like I mean, they found them all, and
Wow.
I was able to get those pieces back. So, that's where I feel like, yeah, in that community, like for that day, I was put first.
Yeah.
You know?
That's
Uh,
incredible.
so that's a story where, yeah, just because of that tight knit community, you're able to reach out to these people. And one of them was literally they in front of a small grocery store, and this is a really tiny grocery store, about the size of like a regular room, I would say. Just small convenience store. Like one of the shopkeepers found one of those clothings, and they kept it inside. And then one of our friends that she was shopping, and she was just making conversation with the shopkeeper about how I lost stuff and how she was looking for them. And the shopkeeper goes, "Really? I literally have one of these pieces here." And
That's
it would be
fantastic.
stuff like that where people are just looking around for these things, or they found one. Like one of them actually was like on the side of the road where I was walking. My mom had told them, around which area I was walking, people where people live there, all of that. So yeah, that's an example.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Would you say that people in Macedonia are comfortable taking on risks, or are they more risk avoidant?
Um, I think that also depends. It just kind of, again, it depends on more of how much you have to risk, you know, and then it depends on how much you feel like your community is behind you. And that can be family or larger community, it can be friends, but I don't think people tend to be as comfortable taking risks individually,
Hmm.
especially large risks. If you're starting a business, a lot of times people look for business partners here. Where in the U.S., it's there's a lot more like solo developers, solo whatnot, solo
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. It's just kind of it would be nice to have a co-founder or a partner, but hey, if you don't, that's fine. Just solo everything, right? And you don't usually ask for permission or for when you have an idea. A lot of times you're not gonna converse with it with your friends in terms of, hey, like, do you want to help me with this idea, unless they are specifically skilled at that, and you think you think they have something very practical to offer. You're not going to ask them to just be a part of your business idea.
Hmm.
And here it's more of like you talk to your friends and you're like, "Oh, I have this idea. What do you guys think?" You know, it's and then if you hear positive feedback from your friends, you might still start it on your own, but you might also a lot of times start it with your friends. And again, starting it on your own depends on how much you have to risk. If you're more financially comfortable, you might be willing to risk more. If you're less financially comfortable, I think you're going to want to be part of a community effort when
Hmm.
you're risking something. Uh, it's a big like it depends answer. I would say potentially less risk prone because a lot of times, in the US, you make more. Like the salaries are significantly higher in the US than they are in Macedonia. And therefore, you're able to risk a little bit more in the US.
Hmm.
Because again, like if I was going to open a clothing business, we're probably both going to, buy clothes from China, right? For a lot of times you just export things from people that mass produce these things,
Right.
and a lot of times those centers are going to be in China or wherever. And I'm going to be, as a Macedonian, be buying the same clothes that you will be buying, but my salary is 10 times lower than yours, meaning you make in a month what I it was going to it's going to take me most of a year to make that amount.
Wow.
So then because of that, I'm a little bit less risk prone, unless I have people in my community that maybe are already doing that, or people in my community that think they have a great idea they can help me with, or people in my community that are going to be in on this financial thing with me, where we all pitch in, but then we all share the benefits. And then if you're going to miss like a meeting or whatever, someone else can step
Hmm.
in all of those things. So it's, again, I think community plays a big role, but then also, yeah, you have the financial realities of taking risks. A lot of times when I think of risk, I think of something that's financially associated. Um, and that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do Macedonians prefer to have fun and be more indulgent, or are they more reserved?
Definitely fun. They're
Yeah.
definitely on the fun side. That's one thing where I think in in a lot of these things, you might find some parallels with more of like Spanish, or Mexican speaking, Spanish speaking, or like the Mexican population in the U.S. I feel like you'll find parallels in what I'm saying, and a lot of times I see these parallels or relations when I think about those cultures.
Hmm.
Like when you think about like Spaniards, I feel like you'll think about parties and dancing, and you know what I mean.
Fiestas.
And yeah, see, and it's I feel like Macedonian love those things. Like we have so many holidays here that are just an excuse to go out and party with your friends. You have so many like saints, and a lot of times when it's that saint's day, if your name is similar to that saint, you are gonna have like a name day, which is just another birthday where you invite your whole family and everyone else, and they celebrate with you, and it's that's part of the culture. And then just so many holidays, so many days off where people are just not working. You're just like, okay, I guess people don't work. But and it's fine. It's again, it's one of those things where pros and cons. Like you'll have random holidays, and the pro is that you get to be at home with your family. You get to do whatever you want that day. The con is if you want to buy something from the store that day, the store is closed, and the other con is, again, I mean, then the pro of like working less is you get to relax a little bit more when working. The con is you don't get Amazon 2 day shipping because the other person is also relaxing. So,
I feel
um,
like that's a pro personally, because it's like it's actually ridiculous here, where it's like we have to have Amazon drivers driving through every national holiday, and it's
yeah,
just like give these people a break, man.
right. So, yeah, I would definitely lean more on the we don't have to be efficient all the time. There's that level of humanity that you should support that rest, which is, I think, part of it is, I think, in a lot of times in U.S. culture, it's kind of said as you rest so that you can be better at work when you come back. That's the US answer.
Yeah,
That's the US culture answer. Where here it's more of like you rest because that's also a big part of life, and that's also part of what you were made to do, you know. It's you don't connect it to you rest so you can show up better at work.
right.
That's not how it's connected. It's more like, no, take some rest, like take time to enjoy things with family. You don't have to think about it as like recharging your batteries so I can show up better for work.
Yeah.
And
Rest and
again,
relaxation is for you,
right,
not your employer.
right. And the reality is that like you are probably going to show up better at work once you're rested, right?
Sure.
Because if you're overworked all the time, you're not going to be able to sustain that. But if you rest, you're able to show up better at work. But that's not the reason that people do it here, and that's not the reason you see it that way. And back to your question is, I definitely Macedonians love to have fun,
Hmm.
and that starts at very early. People just go out, have fun, since I don't know. And part of that is, again, small town here. I was out with friends when I was 13 years old. That's a common thing, and you're out with friends, and you come back home at like midnight ish, 1 o'clock. You know, and because you don't drive, no one's there to pick you up, no one's anything. You walk, you come back. And you're just out with friends, and no one's worried about that because these are generally safe communities.
Yeah.
And so that's why you're able to have fun when you're younger. You're able to have fun when at any age really. But as soon as you're comfortable going outside, being outside, so like 13 years old, 14 years old, people are going to be outside, and people are going to be having fun at all different ages. That can be like actual parties for maybe older people. It can be just talking outside with your buddies, at any part of the town, because you can walk, you can do anything. You're just walking around this whole town with your friends, even when you're younger. But fun is a big component of what Macedonians live for. That also comes with like food. There's, food is part of almost any outing. And you're also going to drink a lot of times when you're out. That doesn't mean always getting drunk, but that is just kind of just like sharing a beer with your friends.
Hmm.
And that's a very big part of the culture as a whole. So
Gotcha. Thank you for that. How does Macedonia handle time? Are they more strict with schedules, or can you arrive with a little bit of flexibility?
yeah, so based off of, if we go back to just the work culture, where people are more relaxed, I feel like that just goes and overflows into everything else. Which typically what it looks like is in personal settings, it's okay. Like there's going to be people that are a little bit more punctual, but there's more leniency. It's very common for Macedonians to be 5, 10, 15 minutes late to a personal event, you know. Now, maybe if you're meeting someone for the first time, you're not, you're going to want to wait, get an impression. So then you're going to be a little bit more punctual. But you're going out with your friends and they said we're going to be at this place at 9, very common for people to show up at 9:15, 9:20.
Gotcha.
And but in a professional setting, people are punctual. They show up early, they show up when they're supposed to. So because then it's a different type of relationship where you feel like there's less leniency and you have to show up as your best self. Uh, Whereas with you're just with your friends, I think people don't care as much about. Obviously, they're not going to be 2 hours late, but
Right.
you know, 15-20 minutes late is a normal window where people arrive within that. So I would say about that as far as flexibility.
Gotcha.
Even though again towns are smaller and you would think they would be there on time because it doesn't take them as much time to get there. But it just kind of the mentality where it's just, oh, I'm out the door, yeah, I'm coming, and it's like 9 and it takes you 10-15 minutes to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just slides the scale of when you have to
Right.
leave. Yeah, and
Yeah.
just being like, well, I left at 9. I was on time.
And then it's your friends don't care that much that you were late. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's also it's not as I feel like in the US they might not be too spoken, but there's more again because there's a bigger emphasis on work. There's a bigger
Yeah.
emphasis on work culture and the time is money thing.
Yep.
Then therefore your time has a lot more value. And it's if I'm 10 or 15 minutes late to a coffee meeting with you, you're going to be a little bit more irritated
Hmm.
because that your time matters and this is a direct you know attack on basically, or this is me saying I don't value your time.
Right.
Like I
Which is
don't
not,
value. Right. And again, it's still not a black and white thing. I just
of
think,
course.
if people hear, like, if you're 30 minutes late, they're going to be mad at you. They're going to be like, okay, man, especially if there's only one person there. If
Yeah.
there's two people there, you can be 30 minutes late. They have something to interact with, someone to be there with. But, you know, if if it's just one person and you're like 20 minutes late or more, then they're going to be slightly irritated. They're
Yeah.
going to be like, okay, like I'm just waiting here by myself. And it's not really even more of a, you don't value my time. It's more of like, why are you leaving me here by myself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
No, that makes
I
sense.
came here to be in community with you. It's nothing like my time has value and you're not valuing my time, that I came here to give you my time. It's more of like I came here to be in a community with you and experience this with you together,
Right.
and therefore I want to experience that with you together. It's a slight shift, but they would still be mad after a certain point.
Right. Hopefully Google doesn't kick us out. Speaking of time is money, I don't know if there's a cap on this. So if I lose you, apologies. We can just wrap it if
Yeah.
we lose you. But the last question for you: what's the number one thing Americans should know before booking their flight to Macedonia?
Um, I think it would be just depending on what you're looking for. Macedonia could or could not be the right place for you. Macedonia is full of mountains. It's full of people that are very loving, welcoming, and it's slow. It's also a slower country where it's just a slower pace of life. So depending on if you're coming here for a vacation or longer stay, or even a move, that's something that you're going to have to be adjusted to or experience. So if you're looking for, a big bustling city with all the best to offer in the world, maybe you want to go to like other European cities that are, larger, more common. If you're looking for like more mountains and a place to rest, nature and maybe just Macedonia is cheaper too. It's very affordable. So then the biggest cost is going to be really the ticket. Otherwise, if you have some savings, you could live in Macedonia for a while just off of your savings and be set. You don't have to worry about a lot here. And yeah, it's just a place where I think you can rest if you want rest. If that's what you're going for, I think you have a lot of community, you have a lot of nature, you have good places that are affordable that can give you some time to rest and think. But if you're looking for more attractions and looking for, I don't know, a different lifestyle or different thing to get out of your travel, then Macedonia might not be the right place for you. Don't get me wrong; there's definitely good things to see here, but a lot of times there are things in other cities that they maybe do a little bit better. Like if you're looking to see statues and like architecture, you're probably gonna want to see Paris as opposed to Skopje, Macedonia. Skopje, Macedonia has stuff. Don't get me wrong, but Paris is gonna be, if that's what you're going for, that's gonna be the place that you want to be at. If you want something that again is affordable, is gonna give you rest, you're gonna see a lot of nature, then Macedonia might be the place for you.
Gotcha. That's fantastic. Tim, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of really insightful information. You've made me want to visit Macedonia for sure.
Anytime, man. I have a bed for you.
Uh,
So
Thank you
yeah,
so
if you're
much.
visiting, let me know. If you're thinking about visiting, let me know. I can help you out. Let you know when I'm here or not, and I'll walk you through town.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. We'll let you go. I hope you have a good one. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, you too. Thanks,
Thanks.
AJ.
Bye. I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, the world needs you. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.